Welcome everybody, Bits and Bobs coming at you on a Wednesday. Will is here. Will, hello.
Hey Joe.
And Dan McDonald with us. You're very welcome.
Thank you, Joe.
You were due to come in today regardless to talk Irish football, but then the Mark Canham thing happened yesterday and we did a breaking news, Mark Canham piece, and we thought, but you know what? Why don't we just expand your repertoire? You've hot-footed it from Abbottstown, I presume.
Yeah.
David Carell, FAI, Chief Executive, speaking to the media. So we'll hear all about that. There's too much sport on. That is my overwhelming sense. I am overwhelmed by my overwhelming sense. April and May are the two busiest months of sport in the year now, I think, now that GAA has moved back into that window. We have Champions Cup reaching a crescendo. Women's Six Nations, piece on that in your feed as we speak today. Premier League usually, grabbing all the attention. But, it's reaching a peak, maybe even tonight. Champions League knockout stages, hurling, and by that I mean the Munster Championship, Gaelic football, League of Ireland. This is the busy period, a lot of games on at the moment, and then you have the one-offs, the Masters. We segue into the Crucible. Quail Hollow will be here before you know it. Like, what do you do?
Punchestown next week for horse racing people as well, like the Grand National, we've heard all of that. Willie Mullins, Dan Skelton going at it this week in Sandown. There's
It's too much.
There's a lot happening.
Yeah, I can't.
Only there was a daily sports podcast overall.
That's the problem. If only there were enough hours in the day to do enough watching to populate the daily sports.
Well, you had the idea of billable hours when we're not in the office.
I did say that last week.
Anything we're watching, like the Masters, that's 20 billable hours there.
Yeah, even €1 for every billable hour.
What is the definition of work when you work in sports media? So you can use it very loosely. It's a great excuse at home. It's like I have to watch. I have to watch
But
this.
in the firm, the late Gene Hackman said, anytime you're even thinking about the law, bill declined. So anytime we're even
What a reference that is.
thinking about sport,
Not since Rory McIlroy have I heard someone just pull a John Grisham like that.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
reckoning.
This could be, by the way, the night the Premier League is decided. Just to mention that, to mark that card, Liverpool fans supporting Arsenal this evening against Palace. Don't do this to us again. For 1,000 Indosport podcast points, where did Liverpool watch Chelsea beat Manchester City in 2020 during COVID to win the league title? Formby Hotel and Golf Resort. I guarantee someone out there got that, I guarantee.
Yeah.
Which is impressive. So just to jog your memory, you get the mobile phone footage and it's all just a bit... Well, this is very COVID-y, So Dave Jones and Jamie Redknapp are in a Sky Sports studio. This is how you watched it, the 30-year famine. Jones and Redknapp in studio, and then they had a 4 squares on a TV screen, giant screen with Souness, Tomo, Dalglish, and then Klopp joined them from Formby Hotel and Golf Resort. And it's just difficult. We know what it's like trying to set up different Zoom lines. There's feedback. There's all sorts of things. So here's the moment where, you say, Kenny is, Dalglish to Klopp. It's going to be beautiful.
Kenny's with you as well, Jurgen, here. What would be your message, Kenny, to Jurgen now?
Don't be so modest. You've been absolutely fantastic for everybody. And there is no small measure that you should accept.
Klopp's nodding at this part. Thank you.
It's truly humane, understanding. And
Understanding.
I think your dad must have been at our side during the war because you see.
He's saying there, your dad must have been on our side during the war.
Is that what he said?
Yeah.
What do you say to that, Jurgen?
Thank you. Yeah, I understand. I didn't understand most of it, not because of Kenny's Scottish dialect, but this time the quality was not so good, so I only understood the first part.
This is why you really want to beat Spurs at Anfield at the weekend.
I completely missed that war comment at the time. Yeah.
Well, everyone missed it.
Yeah, it was a different time,
Your dad must have been on our side during the war because you're a scout. Listen, I can't get every word either.
They
But
turned the feedback up on that one.
Yeah. That was actually there was no feedback at all there. It was just
yeah. Hi, Joan Team, says Paul. Just listen to the Ken Doherty interview. Big fan of the snooker. Isn't Ken just the soundest person you could ever encounter? A great role model and ambassador for Ireland Irish snooker. Speaks so well about the game. His love and passion for snooker so evident. I'm looking forward to listening to his commentary over the next few weeks. Great interview. Please get him on after the World Championships for a debrief if possible. Cheers, Paul. We will. He was really good. And all sorts of things. His relationship with his cue was fascinating, actually. Bought for £2 and John Higgins would routinely come up to him and quote, say, "Why are you playing with that piece of shit? It's warped." But it's just an extension of his body, you know. I started using a new cue just this year. For the first time since 1981.
And the cost of the new cues, the modern cues, was staggering. And you have to wait years to get them. I was really surprised at that.
6-year wait for the John Parrott ones. 6 years.
So was John Parrott the guy pocketing all the money from that? I was
I
wondering.
don't know. So that's waiting for you. That won't date overly. And he was giving us a great insight into Ronnie O'Sullivan as well. You know, he's been off obviously since January, hasn't played. And, you know, Ronnie's often, it's what's Ronnie done now? He snapped his cue. But Ken was saying, like, there's crippling anxiety at the moment. And even he was going to play in the Welsh Open recently, and he drove up the night before. And then on the morning, he was having breakfast with a mutual friend of Ken's. And he said, I can't, and drove home. So that's where Ronnie's been for the last couple of months. But he's playing Ali Carter, his hated rival, as we speak. So that is waiting for you. That won't date. Very last one, just to mention, somebody emailed in. Do you know what? I'll do that later. I'll do it later. I'm all over the place. A lot of sheets. I guess we got to talk FAI, Dan.
Yeah.
Yes, we got it. So, should we start with today, or should we just set the context of yesterday?
Well, I suppose what extra would you want to say about yesterday? I mean, I know obviously Will and Aidan spoke about it, and
for people who didn't
aware,
catch it,
yeah.
Mark Canham, 11:08 a.m. email is leaving. This was a surprise.
Yeah, it's not a surprise that Mark Canham is leaving the FAI. Like, I was in with him a month ago, 3 weeks ago, at a press briefing, and I actually asked him. And the reason I asked him about his future is because there had been sort of persistent murmurs that he'd been around the place less, and there was a sense that, you know, he wasn't going to be around for too much longer. Now, at the time, his response was, well, no, you know, in the medium term, and spoke, you know, very confident in what we're doing. So it's quite a development, I think, that it's happened this quickly. Like, it's been reported, and my understanding, like, he's been in meetings with people who work very closely to him in the last couple of days, but no inkling that this is coming. So the shock is that it's just, wow, you're gone now, even though he's staying around for a while longer, and he was actually hanging around out there today.
Okay.
But yeah, the fact that Mark Canham is not going to be part of the FAI's future, not surprising.
Yeah, he had been promoted in September to Chief Football Officer from Director of Football. He cited personal reasons, very much so in his statement, as well as professional. Colleagues didn't know 20 minutes before the news went public that it was happening. So it was that kind of a situation. He's been here 3 years, appointed in 22, succeeded Ruud Doctor, had been like director of coaching with the Premier League, overseeing academies there, had worked in other areas the game before that. So that was that was his background. Like, there's his legacy, which is difficult to fully know just yet, because he is the man behind the Football Pathways plan. There were other things which we do know about. He oversaw all the international teams, so he was behind, or certainly the face of, and probably behind it as well, the 230-day long search for Hamer Hallgrimsson, which was just I think with the public, very damaging to him for numerous reasons. You know, doing interviews where, like, oh yeah, no, sorry, we still don't have a manager now, but we'll see if John O'Shea is around to take the summer games. Not, I've spoken to John O'Shea in advance of doing this interview, he's definitely around to take charge. It's, we'll check if John's around. You know, presumably John saw that clip the same time as everybody else. That was very damaging. Hamer Hallgrimsson's turning into a very reasonable choice, I think it's fair to say, at this point, so it could all end well. Eileen Gleeson, that appointment seems very flawed. There was a degree there of, well, you're here. Beating these minnows seems to have gone well. In you go. The Colin Healy situation looms large for a lot of people. Colin Healy is not a man who falls out with many people in football, and has fallen out very badly here with Canham. Bad relationship with the league. Communication poor at best is one of the criticisms of people in the league. So it's hard to know. The FAI president Paul Cook in the statement said of the Football Pathways plan, like, this is the first time that we've had a clear whole game approach. You can look at that two ways. I mean, it's more an indictment of Irish football than Canham's a visionary. I mean, it was fairly low-hanging fruit to try and salvage a completely dysfunctional system. But look, he had a stab at it. That's his job. You know, we've spoken before. It's not a disastrous plan. I know the calendar is contentious, but that could be in 10, 15 years' time the thing you say where, you know that Callum guy that people didn't really like? Hamer Grimson got us to a World Cup, but the Pathways plan has largely paid dividends. And David Carell, I know, said today that they're gonna back that plan 100%. But that could maybe save his legacy. We're probably at saving his legacy. I don't think he's a popular figure in Irish football.
No, and I think it is true. Often with a lot of these people, you get judged in hindsight. Rude Doctor was there previously, and maybe one or two things he looked to bring in maybe down the line. People are like, okay, yeah, you could see a little bit of that. Look, the problem with Mark probably is that even. You are right, like Hamer could turn out to be a good appointment. But obviously along the way, how it was handled, and never mind the public statement stuff, I mean, that was damaging as well, don't get me wrong. But also just managed to alienate people along the way, like a lot of the Stephen Bradley, Damien Duff stuff would have been annoying to how they were treated along the way. And that was Jonathan Hill and Canham as well.
But they were late to the meeting with Stephen Bradley.
Yeah.
And he left.
Yeah.
And they felt this is box ticking anyway. You don't want to hire him.
Yeah. And just things like that. And like in that role, I do think it's a difficult job. I think it's important to stress that, there's quotes coming out this evening, and David Carell is trying to almost address it. I don't think it's an impossible job, but the fact that that's the line of questioning reflects that it is tough, and this is a role that I guess has in some respects been outsourced to an overseas voice for a period of time. There's been two Dutch people in that role, and then Mark Canham, who ended up being more powerful than the previous two because Wim Koevermans and Ruud Doctor weren't appointing senior managers, which is the most high profile thing that you will do. So a lot of it fell on his desk, but he just wasn't able to maybe bring people with him. And it's a big personality function in that role. And it is interesting over the last couple of days speaking to people that, externally there's a lot of derision towards Mark Canham, and probably from people who never worked with him closely, like Bradley, Duff, etc. Probably people internally who've worked with him. You don't have them saying, "God, that guy, he's such a."
Right.
It's more, good guy, but just wasn't the guy. For the role, and maybe at times almost just didn't have the force of personality to get stuff to and to convey his point.
Well, I have to say, I think, and it's from afar, so I think that's a point well made about people who work with him.
Yeah,
they're not saying this guy's a joke.
No, they're not, and I'm not saying he's an abusive term you would use for someone you don't like. It's not quite that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought, and a lot of people have talked about his communication. That for me was the big issue with him, in that he was very unnatural in how he spoke. Like it was like a LinkedIn jargon post whenever he spoke. It was unconvincing. It was unnatural. It therefore meant he lacked a sincerity. You never felt he was super passionate about this. I never saw the banging of the table. We're going to get this right for Irish football. He was always removed and cool and clinical, but not clinical in the best meaning of the word, as in we're going to have a manager by April, here's a manager by April. That's clinical. God, this guy gets things done. He's just, he's efficient. Like I remember one of the first podcasts we did in September, this was around the time that it had emerged, the government, I think Pascal Donoghue almost had to come out and say, here, they're on to us about Brexit adjustment funding and different things. They missed the deadline. Yeah. Like they were in line to get money here, real money, from the Brexit adjustment fund, and they missed the deadline. And David Carell last week was talking about getting that money. He doesn't seem to realise the deadline's done. Now, maybe Carell will blame people who gave him that information within the FAI, but Carell, you're the one saying it, so you have to own it a little bit. And then a few days later, Mark Canham, he's the face of Hamer Grimson, he's the face of this, and his line on this, I think this just captured him. And so they have missed the deadline here is the context. They've lost all this money. It's their shit show. And, well, Mark, what about this? And he said, we are happy to accept we may have missed an opportunity as an association on that specific fund.
Yeah.
Game over. You're just not connecting with anybody. It's just not working. If he had been a brilliant operator behind the scenes and getting things done brilliantly, you would say, okay, look, I can't really relate to this guy, but he's doing a really good job, and PR is not the number one requirement for his job. But when things aren't happening brilliantly, a la Hamer, a la the Brexit Adjustment Fund and any other number of things, and the PR is bad and unconvincing. It was just never going to end. It just didn't work. The public, him, Irish football, him, it never worked.
No, and people knew. I think people internally knew it was probably like it was game over for him at that point, and there were certainly stories about him looking for other jobs, and it was clear that while he did come over initially, I think Aidan mentioned this yesterday, like, you know, he came over and moved to Ireland, unlike Jonathan Hill. Yeah, there was definitely a sense he was around less, and there was a sense this was, I'm sure he would deny that, but this would have been, you know, a strong view by multiple people I would speak to who'd be within those corridors every day. But he was there today.
I was just going to say, so Abbottstown today, you arrive.
I arrive, I walk into the reception, and just go over this little waiting area, and Mark Canham was just sat there chatting to one or two of the reporters that are there early for the gig. And just sat down and just had a conversation with a couple of us for a period of time. Look, it's an off-the-record conversation, but it was nothing like sensational being discussed. It was just the fact he was there. And then Hamer it was like an episode of Cheers. Like Hamer just pops in. It's like, Hamer. And like, he's just back from Derry, his trip. And everyone was just milling around having a very civil conversation. But there was a general vibe, I have to say, and I wrote it in my piece today, that there's not a great amount of sadness that Mark Canham is leaving, and I don't think he's sad that he's leaving. Okay. And it's pretty clear from his demeanour that he won't miss this job. And I think the broad reach of this job and all the politics you have to deal with, I don't think it was for him. And you almost look at it now, and I don't think he could, I'm sure he would challenge it, but I don't think he could argue that he's a very corporate guy. Like, he is a product of the Premier League. And I wrote a piece when he came in. I don't think he necessarily liked it, but I spoke to people who knew him in England, and their description of him was very Premier League. And in the English football vernacular, that has a meaning. Like, that's like the very polished, very pristine, you know, very, you know, and buzzwords and jargon, and that's fine. But when you think about it now, to be able to go into some of the rooms that he had to go into, that's not going to fly.
Well, can I just mention, and then by all means, Gavin Cooney, David Sneyd have written about it as well, trying to assess his legacy and on some of the rooms he may have had to go into, and some of the antipathy he may have faced. They say Canham never gave any opinion on that topic, but one staffer recalls Canham being taken aback at a grassroots event where he was told, "Be careful bringing your British ideas over here." Some of the other aspects of feedback during his countrywide consultation sessions for the Pathways Plan were shocking. One person at a session in Cork asked Canham if he knew what silage was. Another person said, "Fuck off back to England." Now that does not reflect well on us either.
No, it doesn't. And like that, and you know, he's going to have dealt with a lot of idiots during his time in that job, you know, and you have to separate that. And I've said this to people who've maybe been very critical at times, that you just have to be careful with the tone of some of the they're coming over here type of thing, because look, football's a very international game. That's one of the strengths, you know, but as I've sort of alluded to, like, it is that particular role that he's in has basically been outsourced for 17 years to someone who doesn't know the landscape at all.
I think there's a push to get an Irish replacement.
Oh, I think there is. I mean, they obviously, you can't say we're going to appoint an Irish person, but you could read between the lines of David Carell's stuff today. I think they know. And look, I'll be honest, this iteration of the FAI still isn't particularly impressive. I still think they're massively obsessed by communication and how they're perceived. So I think if they believe that the winds are blowing, the people want an Irish candidate, they'll appoint an Irish candidate.
That's my sense too, yeah.
But it is interesting, like, you know, there does seem to be, it's almost like a natural time for the Canham era to end. You outlined a number of things there and how he spoke to the media. He is leaving of his own volition. Like, he'd still be in the job if he wanted to be in the job.
He's not leaving in disgrace. I'm not, you know, he's
I know, but
perfectly entitled to be there.
Well,
today,
a lot of people probably are happy or not, you know, sad that he's leaving. Ultimately, he could still be doing this job, even though a lot of people would probably like to see a change made.
I think he would have come up under pressure, maybe some more pressure internally, if he was still there in a year's time. From what I was saying, But no, I take your point. Yeah, like but this is the problem. There's a real deficit of leadership in the FAI generally. Like, who are the people? And this is the thing. Like, power ended up concentrated around a very small number of people, and like, this is part of the thing now, is that who appoints his replacement? Who is the authority to appoint his replacement? Well, let's roll out Packy. You know, like, but
a lot of people, by the way, were critical of your piece on Packy, in touch with us, saying that's a bit harsh.
Well, that's interesting, because I don't think I've ever written a piece about someone within football where I've received absolutely zero backlash from anyone within football.
Okay.
And I've had multiple people reach out who endorsed it. But I think what I would say about that piece is there's often a real difference between writing something and speaking about it, and the boundaries of what you can say and how you portray it. And I can understand how some people would say, oh, it seems a bit vague in parts and seems a bit, you know.
Yeah.
I came at that from a place of absolute confidence of what I was saying, and every interaction I've had since, including from fellow board members, would make me think, stand over every word of it, yeah.
Just the last one. So Hamer was at Ryan McBride Brandywell last night. Derry beat Sligo. After opening night, where I thought this Derry lad are in serious trouble. They're nuzzling along okay. They're within a few points atop now. But John Russell was saying Hamer was over to him. So Sligo had just been beaten, 3-0 defeat. And John Russell was saying, Hamer, he came over, he offered a bit of encouragement. He liked the way we played, how we progressed the ball through the thirds, chances we created, young players who didn't drop their heads. Come on. The charm offensive this man is on.
I think he might have had his meeting with Bradley as well. I think that might have been on the...
We give Hamer some love here.
But I think Hamer...
Very mature man.
I don't think there's any... I could be wrong here.
I think people really like him.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever got...
I'm talking about the League of Ireland managers.
Yeah, well, obviously, listen, Bradley had a right cut at him, and I understand where that came from, actually, but I think how Hamer handled it, like, you know, is quite impressive. And as I said, I was at the Rovers Cork game last week on the Monday night, and Hamer's just wandering around on his own. Doesn't have a handler. Doesn't need to have a lot of these FAI people. They need to be man marked everywhere. And I think people need to remember sometimes where Hamer comes from. And he's very different to, like, he's not Martin O'Neill and someone who's been in the English football Premier League bubble. Like, you know, Hamer's first European match. First game in European competition at any level, I think, was with a small Icelandic team who lost to St. Pat's in Richmond Park in 2011. He's not someone who's been in, like, Martin O'Neill was winning European Cups, and Trapattoni was, like, you know, football royalty who'd managed some of the biggest clubs in the world and thought we were all sort of, you know, bunch of sort of pixie Irish here. Hamer is, like, from a small town in Iceland. The league that he's been involved with for most of his life is incredibly similar to the League of Ireland, and people sort of assume that he would almost operate on this, like, elevated level above it. That's actually not him. He would have so much in common with all of those managers, because, like, their pedigree, their background is very similar, and, like, in some cases much better playing careers than he ever had.
It's the biggest job of his career. I hadn't really considered it. Like, it's stature. Like, I know he got Iceland to the Euros, they beat England, but in terms of just a bigger national team, this is the biggest job.
But he said he can't get his head around all the media attention. He can't get his head around the travelling support. He can't get his head around a lot of media will travel to the games, that they're interested. And this is the thing. I think he'd be way more relaxed. Like, he'll just come over and have a conversation. And honestly, we're so conditioned to conflict and distance and no, like, you have to go over there. I think at times he's an adult and is like, well, this is bizarre.
Do you know, that's the word. I think he just seems like a real grown-up.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued as to what he's doing. He's living here full time. I'm like, what's he doing? How is he filling his day?
What about his patients at home?
I know. There's
people there with, like,
obviously there's a phone-in station in his island in Iceland talking about the waiting lists at the dental surgery. But
is he living here?
This is a vague. He said it on the Late Late Show that he is. I'm not entirely sure where he lives. I know he was at Pats and Rovers last Friday, but I think he was at the Premier League on Saturday. I think he was over at Everton on Saturday. A couple of games Monday, Tuesday. I'm not sure, is he in an apartment or a hotel or wherever he is, but
find out for us, will you?
I know he had sort of some kind of surgery himself, like a physical ailment over the off season, in an Irish off season sense. So that's why he wasn't necessarily around in December, January. And he wasn't around at some of the end of year shindigs that you're meant to sort of go and press the flesh at, but he's sort of making up for it now, I
Put
think.
him up at like Farmley House or something, you know?
Yeah.
Something befitting the role.
Yeah, definitely. I like that.
Just to move on, is there anything David Carell said today that's of major newsworthiness?
Look, there was a lot, and I'm going to do a piece probably on the site that will run through a lot of the different smaller talking points. Maybe to bullet point it a little bit. Not denying that there could be some like redundancies and difficult times coming ahead at Abbottstown. That's certainly my information as well. That there is cutbacks coming, which is the bigger picture here. Right. Very strong about getting a coalition of voices together, and the invite being extended to, say, League of Ireland managers who may have been critical of them to go into government and properly push this forward. And basically has committed himself to saying, look, and this has been intimated in recent weeks, but this academy funding stuff, it has to be in budget 2026.
Okay.
It has to be.
Okay.
So, other dare I say it, other bits and bobs that have come up. There'll be a piece around that, but they are probably the top lines.
The headline stuff. Okay. We'll push on. We'll come back to a fuller piece on Irish football next week, I think. I mean, we need to revisit your Dermot Desmond, Shamrock Rovers situation soon. What else is going on is this pretty interesting. I don't have a VPN thingamajig. Do you guys? Are you allowed to admit to that? Don't, if it's incriminating.
I've used it on my travels.
Are they allowed?
I don't have one at home now.
Yeah.
No.
Is it a VPN?
You don't need a VPN when you can access, we did a podcast on, ways to access things in different jurisdictions.
That's a dodgy box.
Yeah, I wouldn't have one, of course.
No, I know.
People
I have occasionally used the VPN when I was away in another country, but wanted to get back into Irish internet to like access certain things. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious to get hold of one and go on the BBC iPlayer, because Gary Lineker did an interview which went out on BBC television Tuesday last night with Amal Rajan. He presents the Today programme on Radio 4, and it was just like a special in so much as I can see, like just an interview with Gary Lineker, but given it was on the BBC, he kind of pretty critical of the BBC in lots of different ways. So he wanted one more contract for sure. He was pretty clear about that. He said, perhaps they wanted me to leave. That was the sense of that. So he was pushed. He says, it's time. I've done it for a long time. It's been brilliant. Again, you won't be surprised to hear his views on their impartiality came up. So, he was asked about March 23. God, 2 years ago now. Remember that night where the match of the day was just no commentary as well? Just the goals. Because everybody kind of down tools in support of him. This was when he had criticised the then government, their immigration policy. He had said that one of their videos promoting it used language which was not dissimilar to that used by Germany in the 30s, and all hell broke loose. So he said, I don't regret saying it publicly because I was right. What I said was accurate. Would I say it again in hindsight? No, I wouldn't, because of all the nonsense that came with it. It was a ridiculous overreaction. And then he was talking about the new rules, which will bring us to a clip that we're going to get to, where he's saying now the rules have changed, where it's not just current affairs people, it's all BBC people who can't really express opinions. That left people like me, who's always given his honest opinion, they suddenly said, oh, I've got to be impartial now. It doesn't make any sense. And so they get into a pretty interesting chat about impartiality. And I guess Palestine is a big part of that. And so here's Lineker just talking about this expectation that he couldn't give his views on things like Palestine.
I know where I stand on this. I'm sorry, it's more important than what the BBC, what's going on there is, the mass murder of thousands of children is probably something that we should have a little opinion on.
But the BBC as a whole needs to be impartial about it.
Why? It needs to be factual.
It needs to be impartial about a conflict, doesn't it? And it's hard.
Does it have to be? It wasn't impartial about Ukraine and Russia.
And you might say that
Why does it have to be impartial about... I understand if it's partial about our government and things in this country and everything like that, but something that's going on that far away, why does it...
Because the Israeli position is that what is happening in Gaza, and by the way, I'm not here as an advocate of the Israeli government, but the Israeli position is that what is happening in Gaza is a response to the slaughter and capture of innocent Israelis on October the 7th. And
which was awful, which was truly awful.
And that full context needs to be there when discussing what's going on.
But that's not the full context, is it? Because the full context starts way before October the 7th, doesn't it?
So, like a lot of valid points, he's well able to handle the counterpoints from Rajan. And later on, they're talking about this documentary which the BBC pulled in February. It was Gaza, How to Survive a War Zone. So the problem seemed to be that the narrator, who was a 13-year-old boy, also turned out to be the son of a Hamas official. Now, it wasn't like the 13-year-old wrote the script. He just voiced it. And so this was a big furore at the time. And the BBC pulled it. They took it off the iPlayer, something Lineker thought was completely wrong.
Knowing what you know now, which is that the narrator of that documentary...
As a child, yeah.
...is a child whose father is a Hamas official. And that wasn't disclosed to the public, which amounts to a serious flaw in the view of the BBC. Would you still sign that letter?
Yes. 13-year-old child narrating. It's not been written by... It's been written by the people who produced the show.
But the BBC failed to do sufficient due diligence.
I don't believe they. I think they just capitulated to lobbying that they get a lot of lobbying.
And audiences didn't know something quite fundamental about the child, which is that he was the son of a Hamas official. Isn't that a problem?
I don't think so, no.
And so you would put the programme back on iPlayer now?
100%. I think you let people make their own minds up. We're adults. We're allowed to see things like that. I mean, it's incredibly moving.
But the argument against it is that if you are addressing an issue like Gaza, doing it through the eyes of a child almost immediately puts you on the side of Palestinians who are suffering.
Well.
And the clip ends there, but his well is telling, it puts you on the side of Palestinians who are suffering. He's like, his face is almost like, well, that's probably the side we should be on here. What you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, I actually, as we all do, we sort of mindlessly scroll and something grabs you. And I saw that. What's this Lineker thing about? Once I started watching, I watched as much as I could of the clip. And look, I'm sure people want a bit of escapism away from politics when they listen to sports stuff. And I get that some people will have issues with it. And of course, you might just end up leaning towards something that's closer to your own view of it. And obviously what he said is closer. It is closer to my own view of it. So obviously I thought, good on him. But I thought, to step back from that, like it was actually quite a powerful exchange, because I think the presenter actually, in a way that a good presenter does, like provided like decent counterpoints and probably, tried to sort of say the right things and what they felt they needed to say. But I thought it was Lineker. I mean, Lineker is still an ex-professional footballer. Like and like whatever you think of him, and I'm sure he's been a divisive figure at times in a lot of ways. I like how he's not afraid to like stray into that territory, and that won't be for everyone. Some people be like, "Oh, stay in your lane," stay in it. But some things are maybe a bit bigger than staying in your lane.
Yeah.
When you have a platform, and like obviously that can be applied inconsistently. That sort of mantra.
Well, I think we tend to applaud it when we agree with what.
Of course, and like all debate now is very binary for a lot of people. I mean, I do get that.
If he was saying the opposite position, I think you shut up, Lineker.
Yeah, who are you to tell us? And we've seen that with other ex-footballers who've sort of gone in very different direction in a lot of things. Denying that certain things happen and whatnot.
Pretty interesting it went out in the BBC. Because this is a real sore point for them. I mean, back in November, it was a big story at the time. Like well over 100 BBC staff signed a letter accusing their employer of pro-Israel bias, and they were calling the BBC to they were citing all sorts of things that they disagreed with. You're not reiterating enough that Israel doesn't give journalists access to Gaza. You don't make it clear when there's not enough evidence to back up an Israeli claim. Some of the headlines, where you're couching what is just murder in very gentle terms. Palestinians die. Not enough context given. Like Lineker straight away with the context, because that's a big thing in all these debates. You see October 7th, and that's just the end point. And Lineker straight away was like, whoa, not the full context. And then the staff said, you're not challenging the Israeli government enough. So this is like an ongoing sore point for the BBC. So you kind of commend them for putting the interview out. But, Lineker and the BBC, not aligned.
I'm not surprised
on anything
that he's left. But
they're so done with each other. That's what became obvious in the interview. So done.
I agree with Dan. I thought that was a good an interesting back and forth and the counterpoints provided. Some of them are kind of like, I suppose, journalism ethics in some ways about like, just letting viewers know the backstory. Like, and I don't think that's an illegitimate point to at least tell viewers the backstory of the people involved in making programs, documentaries, even if it's not Israel and Gaza. Like, it can be any issue. Like, if it's a documentary about football and someone behind the scenes is involved with one of the teams, like, people should have the right to know that. I think. I don't think that's illegitimate.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, language. Like, I mean, I know from covering Robbie Keane working in Israel, and even internally in here, there'd be a real sort of what's the house language here? Since the conflict, since you have to there's a real sort of phraseology, and you think it's like I said before about maybe talking about PACI or FAI. You talk about something, but when you put something on paper, like it's very much okay. And a lot of those headline stories, they really genuinely antagonise and upset people. Often it is just people complying to a house style approach, and the BBC obviously are
well, theirs has been really.
Look, for people, it's a lot more antagonistic now because they consume so much of their news from sort of partisan social media sites that don't comply with that. And sometimes I do have a little bit of sympathy sometimes for the national broadcasters, even though I probably agree with a certain amount of the criticism that sometimes they are complying with a very, strict house style around how you refer to these certain things. But I think, to be fair, Lineker's point is a lot broader and what he's talking about, and he references sort of Ukraine, and I mean, he came to the table prepared for his interview. I think you can say that
he was very relaxed. His body language,
and his delivery is very. That's the thing as well. Delivery was very impressive.
Right, very quickly, Rory McIlroy, Shane Lowry are teaming up again. Masters champion Rory McIlroy.
That's a great sentence.
Just works, doesn't it? Yeah, so they're playing the Zurich Classic, New Orleans again. This is what they won last year. They agreed to play together on like a day 2 post-Ryder Cup over wine. We should do it. It seems like it'd be fun. Okay, let's do it. And so they went and won. And Larry was asked last week, like, is Rory going to play? He's like, yeah, he told me he's playing. He's definitely coming. So they are playing. This is the one where when they won afterwards, it's kind of a party event. So they'd been getting standing ovations in restaurants all week in New Orleans, and then when they won, they went into like a kind of a tent full of fans, and McIlroy's just started singing. Should say here, Shane Lowry is like who you would think would be the singer, is looking at him in horror that he's about to do this. Like, they're just off the course. No one's drunk here. Sorry, of the players. And on he went, and Larry just sort of stood there going, I just can't believe it's happening.
There's a full swing episode on that.
Yeah.
On that.
Good, I actually just watched it the other day.
Yeah, you're happy with full swing.
I'm very pro full swing.
Really?
I actually
likes it. He likes it.
Yeah.
Well, are you like firmly anti?
No, it's watchable.
I thought that that recent series had more weaker episodes than the previous one.
Oh, I haven't watched them.
I've only seen the first 2.
Oh, okay,
3.
yeah. It tapers off a little bit at the end. I felt there is some there's one in Gary Woodland which is
that's really
exceptionally good. I would say that it would so you want something to come out of these shows that you can sort of empathise with some of these people, and some of the golfers can be hard to warm to. Like, I mean, Full Swing didn't start with that horrendous Justin Thomas.
It started with the worst episode.
They
couldn't have started with
the worst opening scene. I think were they gambling on the private jet, or there was
here are some obnoxious frat boys. Come with them on the journey.
It's not like that.
No.
They got Speed at his worst moment. I blame Justin Thomas.
No, it was horrific.
95% of them are far more interesting than you'd ever think from some of their interviews, or just kind of generally looking at them and maybe extrapolating about what they might be like in real life. I actually find it quite illuminating, an insight into that.
Yeah, I think the Gary Woodland one, and my favourite Full Swing moment was Brooks Koepka. With his wife with the walk-in wardrobe.
The Koepka episode.
If you want to sum up the sort of in some ways they have a very full wallet and full life, but there's an emptiness to the existence as well.
It was an ennui to Brooks Koepka.
Dystopian scene I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. I mean, and that's what you want to take away. You don't have to like everyone that's in it. to enjoy.
Oh,
it.
no.
That episode should have won an Emmy. At least a daytime Emmy.
What do you think about this outfit? My life is going down the toilet.
And by the way, at the end of it, I'm going to join Liv. You know, it's just amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's on this weekend. I have one email, and then Will wants an elevator pitch for the NFL draft, which is on Thursday. So this is just I mean, you'd say it was an ad if it wasn't written by someone who says this is not an ad. Okay? But there was something about it which I was taken by. Hi all, love the podcast. I was listening to Bits and Bobs. The story of the two lads at the Masters. Did you hear this?
Yeah.
Wasn't it just class?
Beautiful.
Yeah. Conor McKeown met them at the airport then.
Yeah.
I was listening to the story of the two lads at the Masters. Basically, if you didn't hear this, he painted the most, I mean, the guy should be a writer, vivid picture of the two of them at dawn on the 12th. They'd flown over, looking at each other in wonder, etc. You get the gist. And Joe's hesitation in deciding what to do when he turns 40. It struck me, Podrick Harrington had already given Joe his answer. Lahinch. Harrington was talking about how central golf was to Ireland, and Lahinch, a perfect example. It may not be Augusta, but you could play a round of golf at Lahinch Golf Course. You could snack at the insanely good Hugo's Bakery beside the golf course, follow it up by a few pints in Frawley's, Kenny's or the 19th. Head to Bartra restaurant for dinner and opt for the surprise menu. Wake up the next day and do a surf lesson with Ben. Then head out to the Burn to see Father Ted's house, walk around the nearby Loch Avala farm loop, and drink in the beauty of the Burn in May when it's carpeted with the rarest and most beautiful array of flowers at that time of year. 2 days of sport, activities, nature, good food and drink. In case you're wondering, I'm not the local tourist board or invested in any of the above businesses. My motivation is through sheer love for the place I now call home. I moved here 15 years ago after having an epiphany. I had the epiphany when I was surfing on my 30th birthday. I'm originally from flat and landlocked Kildare. Soon after my 30th birthday, after this epiphany, I quit my Dublin office job to follow my lifelong dream of working in sport, activity, the outdoors. I've since bought a home and settled down here with a beautiful local girl who I met soon after arriving. We're getting married next Friday, the 25th. Tomorrow! Jeez! He's never going to hear this in time.
2 days.
2 days, yeah.
What date's today?
Wednesday today.
It's 48 hours.
Sorry, my date's wrong on my Casio. Never let me down. To say a significant birthday and engaging with the sport changed the course of my life is an understatement. Joe may not be looking for a career change or an epiphany.
Or a new wife, presumably.
But the golf course is still awesome. The pints will still taste good. So perhaps this email encourages him to make his day in a way that works for him without the cringe of being the centre of attention. I'd love, by the way, that my cringe of being the centre of attention has involved several emails talking about this landmark birthday.
Yeah.
I'd like to keep my name anonymous if that's okay. And whether you read this out or not, I don't mind. But sometimes a good podcast makes you feel like you're part of a conversation and can be compelled to give your opinion. Keep up the good work. Kind regards, Anonymous.
Another great email.
Just saying.
I mean,
a lot of interesting people out there.
It is a fantastic place.
You have to do something.
Down there for the Irish Open.
Yeah, I don't know about Ben.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know about Ben's surf lesson capabilities.
Whoa!
But otherwise,
Whoa!
I don't know. I mean,
everyone I'm sure in Lahinch knows Ben.
Ben under the bus.
I thought it might have been Ben.
You can take out Packy Bonner. You're not taking out Ben.
Let's leave Ben out of this.
Ben knows what he's doing. If the anonymous emailer recommends Ben, I'll go for a surf lesson with Ben.
I'm still sick of admitting that Irish Open in Lahinch. I'm sort of sick of it.
That was amazing.
Yeah, that's a real bucket list missed.
You can't overstate the extent to which it's in the town.
Yeah, it's extraordinary.
I enjoy the notion of you not wanting to be the centre of attention. Your face is on billboards, on buses.
Oh, stop.
You present the Six Nations to a million people.
The thing has spiraled in a way that was not the plan 10 years ago.
We've been talking about your 40th for months.
Stop.
Serious main character energy going on.
No. It's true. I know. No, the 40. I just wanted to pass by. He's talking about it every day on the podcast.
What date's your birthday?
No, I'm not.
It's in May.
That's enough. NFL draft Thursday. Would you believe I've never watched an NFL draft? I've seen, you watch documentaries, I've seen the footage. Is this like a good watch, or will I be sitting there during hour 4 going, to hell with this?
The funny thing is, it's actually a very entertaining watch. It's a pity it just starts at like 1 o'clock in the morning just for American TV time, but it's actually, there's a good deal of suspense. You're seeing the future of the sport. Like the notion that the best player in college football gets drafted by the worst team is maybe...
Love that.
Yeah. Like if David Clifford, after winning 2 minors, was like, you're going to Leitrim. and you have no say in the matter.
Yeah.
Apologies to Leitrim viewers.
That's fair.
So this is this Thursday. It's
Wisconsin?
Green Bay. They're kind of spreading the draft around to some of the smaller NFL teams because for the Super Bowl they tend to go to the big cities like Las Vegas, New Orleans, Miami. So Green Bay, Wisconsin is hosting the draft on Thursday night, and the intrigue, I think, comes as our quarterback slated to go number 1 to the Tennessee Titans, Cam Ward, but number 2 is set to be a guy called Travis Hunter, who's aiming to become the first player in about 30 odd years, or potentially even longer, to play both wide receiver and as a cornerback. So he won the Heisman Trophy this year.
As a cornerback or quarterback?
Corner. So basically defending wide receivers and playing wide receiver. He won the best wide receiver award and the best cornerback award, the only player who's ever done that. Okay. And he's basically going to try to make history in the NFL this season when he gets drafted as someone who can play both ways. Ironically, his coach in college was Deion Sanders, who people might know from, there was a good 30 for 30 documentary about him. He played in the World Series of Baseball and the NFL playoffs in the same year. Unbelievable athlete. And he was kind of coached by this guy. So he's going to be drafted potentially by the Cleveland Browns, who are probably the worst team in the NFL. So his career may not blossom as it would if he went to a better team, but people might keep an eye out and see if he can actually become the first player actually to play both offense and defense.
Travis Hunter. Why is it so hard to play offense and defense? That shouldn't be that hard.
It's just,
he said in the most ignorant statement of his life.
I guess it's just, the NFL playbooks are about the size of all the Game of Thrones sellotape together. There's a lot to learn. Yeah. So you don't really have the bandwidth to sit in meetings and kind of be up on both sides of it.
Okay. It's almost an intellectual thing as much as physical, yeah.
Yeah. And also the physical, they're not used to playing every single snap. And as someone pointed out to me recently, he also would have to play 2 positions for 1 paycheck. Doesn't make sense really financially for him, as in he's going to have to double his workload almost, but he won't be getting that much more money.
I put his body through the ringer.
Exactly. So he probably will end up playing either wide receiver or cornerback, but at the moment he's saying I'm playing both or I'm not playing at all, because it's part of his brand.
Travis, see how long that lasts if someone says.
So yeah, at about 1:30 a.m. the second pick should be announced, and if it's him.
No, listen, let me know, text me. I'll be there. Okay, Travis Hunter. Interesting. Anything else? I think that's kind of it. We won't talk to you in the meantime. Friday night's juicy.
Yeah. It's in the week that Mark Canham departs, well, he's still there, for Damien Duff and Stephen Bradley to be going head-to-head in a TV game is sort of perfect, because I'm not at that game myself, but there's going to be...
You at Pat's Bows?
No, I'm actually going to be in Berlin at a stag for the weekend. So I'm going to watch Hertha Berlin on Friday evening as part of...
you should report back next week.
Hertha Berlin. Flavor. Yeah, it's football in Germany is a brilliant experience. Although...
you should talk to Ronan Mullen someday.
Oh, yeah. The only slight disappointment is that they play in... I say disappointment. They play in the Olympic Stadium, which is where the Euros final was last summer. But it's not going to be full. It's like a massive sprawling stadium, and they're in the second Bundesliga, So, but yeah, Duff and Bradley there's going to be the match, and then there's going to be the press stuff. And I think Stephen Bradley's probably up tomorrow anyway, so I'm sure we'll get his thoughts on... When Stephen Bradley does a press conference now, it's a little bit about football, then it's a bit about either internal turmoil at Rovers or what's going on with the FAI. So it's that's the gig.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. That is Bits and Bobs. Dan, thanks for stepping in. Appreciate it.
No worries. Happy to.
Will, thanks very much.
Thanks, Joe.